Welcome everybody to another DoneJS contributors meeting. It is Friday the 13th, April, Friday the 13th. Very scary. We aren't going to have a spooky contributors meeting, so don't worry if you're easily afraid. I am thinking about watching it tonight, though, in celebration of Friday the 13th. So with me is Sheriff. You want to say hello? After he's unmuted.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Sheriff from Algeria.
Welcome, Sheriff. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Hello, I'm Matthew Phillips. Good to see everyone.
How's the whiskey in Tennessee? Or in Kentucky, sorry.
No comment. Yeah, I don't know how you make a mistake.
Because both states go this way. I'm in one of those states.
Isn't that like half of all states go this way? Right?
Well, I'm a vertical stater like Illinois.
Yeah.
It confuses me.
Actually, I live in Indiana, so I'm a vertical state as well. I live across the river.
Now?
Yeah, right across the river. I don't like to tell people. That's why you didn't know.
Hey, I'm Kevin Phillips, no relation to Matthew. I am in Downers Grove, Illinois. How's it going?
The DG, down in Downers Grove. All right, so let's do demos. Matthew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. I've been working on what's it called, tree shaking this week for the last couple weeks actually, and it's not really ready, but I kind of want to show you where I'm at and explain a little bit about how it works, and then for a topic I want to talk about whether it should be on by default or not. So yeah, well, here we have an example. So I don't know if you saw. Actually, I don't think we've had a meeting since then. But in CAN 4.2, we added a new module import. Let's see if I can share the documentation about that. If you go under guides, there is a experimental ES module usage. We've talked about in the past, this might become the default in CAN 5.0, but let's not talk about that yet. For now, you can, if you import CAN/ES, you can individually import any of the CAN.js, the stuff that you need, like CAN component, CAN define map, whatever, anything that's part of CAN core. And then you can just use it individually. And if you're using Webpack, and soon to be Steel, it will know that you're using these two, but you're not using CAN Connect, so it can remove CAN Connect from your build, and it's not part of your build because you're not using it. So this is kind of nice because instead of having how typically in a CAN.js or DoneJS app, we have a stack of a bunch of imports where we're importing everything for individual modules, which is also good for other reasons, but it's a little bit more noise, I guess. Whereas if you're only using a few things, it's a little bit more convenient to do it this way. But you really do need tree shaking to make this viable, so that your build doesn't include a bunch of stuff you don't use. So that's the backstory. So I've been starting to implement this in Steel Tools in the last couple of weeks, and this is a little example application. We're importing define map from CAN.ES, nothing else, and we set down the window because if we don't do this, if we just did this, well, then it would get tree shaken out because it's not actually used. So yeah, we do that, and then you do a build. Currently, I have a pre-release that no one should use because it doesn't really work that well. Let me see, npm this tag Steel Tools. What's the version number? If you just want to try it out, you can, but it doesn't quite work yet because there's a couple of bugs I'm working on. Yeah, it's 1.12 pre is where we're at now. And what actually happens is so we have, let me show this again. We're importing, like I said, importing define map from CAN.ES, and CAN.ES looks like this. It just re-exports everything from core, and that way you can pluck out what you need. And then when you do a build, it winds up looking like this. Scroll all the way down. Lost my scroll bar. Here we go.
Matthew, is the plan to make it import can all eventually?
I don't. Yeah, this is another thing we should talk about. I don't think so, because can all includes like everything in the ecosystem, which that is going to slow down dev quite a bit, because you're like importing all the feathers, even if you're not using feathers, and there's a lot of stuff. We should talk about that. I think we should it maybe not all, but like, I don't know if we had a can most, where it's most stuff, but maybe just a select few ecosystem things like can fixture.
Can common.
Can common, perhaps, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely something we should talk about. Yeah, getting back to this, what happens is, if you notice, it promotes can define as being an import of our main module, even though main module doesn't depend on can define map, it kind of gets promoted. So at this point, the can ES module is this one, and you can see it's just it has a use strict statement and nothing else. This is a current bug, is that it still depends on all of these things, even though it doesn't actually use them. If these imports didn't exist, then we would be able to know that none of this stuff is used at all, and we can prune it from the build, and it all gets removed. And this module would get removed as well, and it would wind up looking like this, and with all this gone. All this goes away. Well, most of it goes away. Everything except for can define that goes away. That's what it should eventually look like. Like I said, it's still a little bit of a work in progress.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's my demo.
So I was going to ask, just related to the can all thing, if you're building since CanJS hard codes versions anyways, should we just be building like a mono file?
Mono file. Say it again.
Essentially build a single giant file with everything in core, or just everything in it, so that, because part of the slowness you're talking about in development is that you have that, like, you request your initial dependencies, and you request these other things, and you request these other things, and that can take a while to load just all those network requests. Instead, we could just build a single.
Oh, so like a 5 megabyte file with everything that exists.
I mean,
yeah,
it'd be faster.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, that would be cool. Currently Steel Tools doesn't have an ES module, like Steel Export can't export an ES module. We would have to add that. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Just a thought, if that's like the concern.
Yeah, it's a concern about including that, because if you look at ecosystem, I think Feathers is the big one. And Feathers it's a framework of the size of CanJS, just about. So that becomes a problem there.
Feathers client is almost the same size as CanJS itself?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Well, maybe for 5.0 that moves out to kind of like is documented not with CanJS, but like in its own GitHub or something.
Right.
But that's that substantive. Cool. That's awesome. I think people really, really like that.
Yes.
Kevin, do you have anything to show us?
Yeah, I'm gonna show off DevTools. All right, so I have been working on DevTools this week. I've got this simple application here that has 2 real properties, a derived property that puts these 2 together, and then a property that's using the new value resolver observable thing, which counts how many times this one changes. So like, I start typing, you can see it changes a bunch. What I've been working on is DevTools, and this is the example app. So now, if you click on one of these elements, you'll see there's this view model sidebar here on the elements panel in Chrome. And you can go in there and basically do whatever you want here, and it will, oops, left my debugger in. And you can use this view model panel to modify your view models. The other things that I've got working are there's now this CanJS panel here as well. You can click on that, and there's two tabs that are not that don't look like tabs because I haven't done any CSS. But if we put that breakpoint back in and type something, this was supposed to be capital. So we'll hit this breakpoint and we want to see why are we here? Why did this happen? So we can go over here, take a look at the queues, and this gives you the can queues log stack with the information that I thought was useful for figuring out why something is changing. So you can trace this back. You can basically see the last thing is that the app view model dispatched a name event with this misspelling or whatever. And you can kind of trace this back through CanJS's queue system to see where this originated and see that basically the place that it came from was this observable on the input value. And you can also click through each of these functions to see exactly what's happening. So if we click this one, it takes us back to our breakpoint. Go back over here. We can click back to the previous one. This is inside of CanDefine where it's dispatching that event. And you can track it back through each of the layers of CanJS's observable queue system. So yeah, that's pretty cool. The last thing, or the thing that I've been working on most recently is this bindings tab. So if we go back and click on here, look at bindings, it's going to open up this separate page with nothing, but we can put in a property like the name. Let's say we want to see all of the bindings for my app's name property. Set this, then what opens up is this crazy graph. So this is what I'm working on now. I was trying to figure out how to make this thing useful. So this is basically a graph of all of the different bindings, not necessarily CanStash bindings, but what changes the thing that you graphed and what it changes. So you can kind of trace through this. If you really understand what's going on, you can kind of trace through this and see here is the property that we were looking at, the name property, and you can kind of trace it through your application. But this is very confusing, and I think most people wouldn't understand this. So that's the topic that maybe we can talk about at the end is what should this look like? What should it do? What should people be able to use and that kind of thing. But that's basically what I have working on so far with DevTools, and hopefully more to come in the next couple of weeks. And a release is my goal for the next couple of weeks, is get this released so people can start using it.
Hey, Kevin, I have a question.
Sure.
To do the queue thing, you have to you need to set a breakpoint, right? And then press refresh. And is that how it works?
Let me share it again. You don't need to, but normally there's nothing in the queues. If nothing is happening,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, if nothing's happening, then you kind of need. Then there won't be anything in the queue stack. So yeah, it's most useful when you're stopped at a breakpoint.
Right. Okay. It'd be cool. I think it'd be nice to have a way to filter out, like maybe a checkbox to filter out the internal things, kind of like we talked about with the graph.
For the queue system, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, it might maybe like a checkbox and just only shows the
queues doesn't really record too many internal things compared to the other graph.
Okay.
I think if you looked at what you just did, there might have been like one of like 5.
There we can. Okay. Share it again. So I don't necessarily agree. I think most of it's internal, right? I don't know.
I guess I don't.
We go back to here. So like if we just did the things that are in the user's code or DOM elements, really, it's just this one, which is your code, and then this input element.
No, I guess I don't know. I guess I don't totally agree with that because what the input change. Okay, sure, that one's valid. Then you want to know that so I guess I look at the last property changed. Okay, I want to know that. Then I want to know that caused the name property to change. That. And then I want to see that essentially the resolver was resolved because of that.
Yeah. So maybe
So at least
would make
those, like you definitely, that's the trace. It's like element changed, property updated, then getter updated, then thing was resolved.
What's the one
Yeah.
you're highlighting right there?
So this one is the name getter. It's this property that combines the first and last name.
Okay.
You think that the
Why doesn't it have a reason?
Go ahead.
Why doesn't it have a reason?
Because we haven't added it correctly to the.
What would be the reason?
The reason would be that my appvm.last changed from whatever it was to what it is now. It'd be the same as this, pretty much, right?
Okay.
Well, these two maybe could be combined, but yeah, I think.
Yeah, the way I would write that is the reason why it was rerun. Yeah, it's very similar. It's like on dependency change ran, because the last change to McAllister to.
I added an A. I should have made this a better example, but yeah.
The update function ran because you could even say it's just like, well, because one of its dependencies changed and it's got to recalculate the observation's value. Do you think that having the context in here is actually valuable? Because I think it just adds noise. Because it's kind of the same thing.
I think it is what?
I think it is valuable because it's easier to read, but I think the problem is that the function name often includes the context. So if these were shorter, if this just said like, I mean, I don't know how it would look, right?
I think the way that you would do this is we need to have. I think I did write up this a little bit somewhere in CanJS's docs. I don't remember where, but if we had very exacting process for how we name everything, then you could, because I assume you're reading the context, or are you reading the context from the task, not from the actual function?
Right.
But you probably could then remove that part from the function.
Yeah, but what would you? It's not normally the beginning, so that's the problem.
Not normally the.
So like, if I were to remove this, it's like pulling it out.
The context is my app view model there isn't really right. I mean, it's what the function's context is called with, but it's really like what I want to be thinking. If giving context isn't as helpful as being like, this is this observation. To me, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe a user would think that my app VM is related, but that's just a happenstance of like how on dependency change is called back. It's really on dependency change is really the function of that observation. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just a weird. I guess I didn't design the context for tasks with the idea that that's like something that would also be logged, where the functions, like those, are intended to be logged, although their meaning is arcane. But that's why I think the better way we could do it is if we have rules about the naming, we could take that bound my app on blah 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 resolve blah blah blah, all that craziness, and we could probably write it with multiple lines or indented or something like that to make it a little bit clearer. Because what you really want to be seeing is for that bound my app VM, you'd say my app VM's name property is binding to, or sorry, it's my app VM's name change count property is, that's kind of what you're in that definition, and you're in the handler that is bound to name. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm talking about the last one, number 4.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't want to edit that one because it's super long. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Another thing that is not super useful about this is there's not. So like these two are both related to the name getter, and there's no way to actually get to that from here. Like you can't click these to actually take you to the getter that you wrote, which would be nice.
Yes, that would be nice, but That's not the function that actually gets run, unfortunately. It gets run inside of update, but that would be
I
nice.
know.
We could probably make that like we could put whatever additional metadata we want on there.
Yeah,
Create
right.
a link property or whatever, and it would link to that
Mhm.
function. What I was thinking of is like what we need is a way so we can actually present this data. What I was for the last one, what I was saying is, if we could indent it, something like this, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We could take what you have and destructure it somehow. So it's like, oh, it's my app view model, it's name change count, and then within that name change count definition, there's somebody is binding on some app, the app view model's name property, and calling a handler, and we are inside this handler. And a really great thing would be like you could click on the handler part, or you could click on name change count part. I don't really know if you can do that, make that kind of thing work, but that would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, if we had the functions, we can make that work.
Yeah, the value definition, you might be able to make that work.
Yeah.
So yeah,
cool.
Maybe instead of like function names, we need to like decorate all of our functions like this with info, and then we have it structured in a certain way. I don't know.
Or the name could be an object that gets 2 strings.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But you don't. Well, that's an interesting idea if that actually works in DevTools. That would be awesome if you could actually just set the name property to like something with a 2 string. If that works, that'd be really cool, because then we can just create instances of this that are structured, but then we can read the information separately. That would be awesome. I don't know if that works. That's worth an experiment.
Why wouldn't it work?
Huh?
Why wouldn't it work?
I don't know. I just feel like there's could be some browser that's like not
Type of.
Huh?
If they use type of.
Yeah, who knows why they do it, what they're doing. You're going to crash like that or something.
Well, DevTools is it's a Chrome extension.
Oh, yeah.
But this works still but this is also designed to work for, we label these names already for not just Chrome, for any.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're not talking about my DevTool. You're just talking about in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah.
That's a cool idea, though. Anywho, anything else, Kevin? That was really cool.
I just have a topic for talking about the graph some more, but that's it for the demo.
We can come back to that. Sheriff, do you have anything that you want to talk about or discuss?
So I was working about today on the issue of handling form data object with can Ajax. I started working on it today, and I was thinking it is a simple task, but it seems I should handle several things like file uploads and nested data objects. So for now, the basic working is I wrote the basics, but I should handle also all the specific issues with the nested objects and binary data also.
That'd be awesome.
Yes.
That's just really cool. I mean, so is it the blob type, or like what do forms give you back when you do file upload?
Yes, the blob form, because the form data is useful for uploading files, and for me, I need it for uploading tasks. So I wish I will finish it this weekend or the next week, hopefully.
That'd be awesome.
Okay. And I will work also on the form guide for creating and updating data on the server. The issue this issue. If show my screen, if you.
You click on the top left. If you hover over, there's like a little.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Attends.
It was working. We saw it.
Okay.
Now.
So you saw my screen now.
Yep, we see it.
Okay. I will work also on this issue. For the code I wrote for the form data object, I wrote this function for now to handle, but it needs much work to be done, and I invoke it here to see if we have a form data object. And I wrote one test, successfully test is the basic, where I instantiate the form data object and append some properties and send the data to the server. But this part or the nested objects for now, it doesn't work, and it should be handled like you see in this line.
Sure, but I don't think that you should have to convert it to an object. My understanding, I think, can't you just pass the form data object to XHR send, the send method? I think you can just pass it a form data and it will. Oh, go ahead.
This is the weird thing with the XHR, the native XHR, it works, but I don't know, there is some work here that changed the behavior of the XHR, so it breaks the native behavior in the CAN Ajax. When I saw the documentation in the MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, I saw that it works natively. But here, there is some, I think it's right there. I don't know.
If data is an object, stringify, and you don't want to stringify it. So you probably just need to detect that it's data and then not stringify it. That would be my guess.
Not stringifying, you mean we don't need this line?
Well, you want it, and if it's not form data, is there a way to like check if the object is an instance of form data? Then
yeah, that's what he was doing up top.
Oh, he is doing that.
Yeah,
but not here.
Yeah, just not here. Yeah.
Okay, I think it probably needs to happen there as well to make it work.
Yeah, I would say instead of, I would try that as instead of trying to convert it to an object.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't stringify it, and then I think that would mean it would be passed as form data, and I think that would work.
Yeah, I didn't try that. I was thinking about it, but I didn't.
And then you don't have to worry about the nested stuff. Everything should just work. Hopefully.
Yes.
That's an interesting. I mean, it's an interesting thing that you could show, which is a lot of times forms like that people make. Having all of the state in the actual input element and in the DOM is all right. And every framework will make those people be like, well, listen to when the events happen, and then you're gonna put that all in an object, and then when the button is clicked, that object is you're gonna serialize it or whatever, and then send it off to the client, which is just a lot of boilerplate to make a very basic HTML form work. I think it's almost worth like a blog post or something like that once you get this working, because it just would be as easy as like on submit, you pass the form element, and then you just get its form data, and you just CAN Ajax send it, and then your view doesn't have, it just can look like HTML. There's no need to set up input bindings and things like that, because you're just going to use the form element to do it. So I don't know. I think that would be really appealing to a whole host of people who aren't like making crazy apps, just making forms. That makes sense. That's cool. Awesome. Anything else, Sheriff?
No, that's it for now.
Cool. Yeah, let us know if you need any help finishing that off.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Then for my demo, I made another recipe that I gave at DoneJS Chicago. I think it went really, really well. I'm just going to go, I'm going to probably put together a full training YouTube video where I go through it and build it step by step for anybody who wants to watch. But this is, all it does is replace the native controls with a slider, a range input type, and a custom play button, and it shows the time. The interesting bits to me is how, and this is something that like I think every framework really struggles with, is how to handle input elements or custom or other elements that have state of their own, right? This video player has state. So if I were to like show its manual controls and start playing it, you can notice everything works still, right? I'm not assuming that the slider down here, like when I hit play, it's not like, I guess what I'm saying is if this video changes its state, I need these controls to update. But if these controls get updated and change their state, I need the video to be updated. This is where two-way binding and things like that inside CanJS can really be beneficial. So let's just talk about how I did this. So we'll just talk about the play button here. So the play button, when the video, it listens to, so we have a plain state property, and there's a button here that when plain is true, so it says pause, and when plain is falsy, says play. So we're not playing. So if this Boolean is false, we'll say play. Now, if someone starts the video, what we do is listen to HTML5 video elements have a play event and a pause event. And we will just call player pause and set plain to true or false. So that handles, if someone were to manually start this video, our widget updates. But then what happens, how do we get the video to play? And this is the really important part. How do we get the video to play when someone clicks play here? So on that click of this play button, I have this toggle play. Toggle play just changes the plain state. Well, that alone won't start the video, right? It won't call play. You need to call play or pause on a video player. You can't do that here. We're just changing the state. So what I do as a side effect, and this is where connected callback is really nice, I can listen to when the plain state changes. And then if it becomes plain, then I will call play on my view model or my video, or I'll call pause. So this is one of the nice things about connected callback and these listens to. This is a nice place to do side effects, right? The plain state has changed, but there's things that we need to do because of that. And we can stick those side effectual things in here. So that's basically it. We do a similar thing for current time. So when someone's dragging this around, all this does is updates the current time property, but we listen to it and update the video's current time.
Cool. So the idea of doing this, or one of the benefits, is that when you're testing this view model, unless you call the connected callback, that's not going to happen. So you don't have to worry about side effectual stuff happening when you're just testing. You can just test the statefulness of it.
Exactly. You can test these methods without worrying what they're doing to like a DOM.
But if you wanted to, you could give it you could call connected callback yourself, give it an element, and test that stuff as well.
Yeah, and one thing I thought about is like, what I've thought about if there's things that we could do with also other side effectual things. You know, encourage people to do maybe even AJAX requests, which you could listen to when playing happened, and then fire an AJAX request in here, and then either submit a new event or update a property when it's done.
Yeah, what would be the best? I hadn't thought about that. Would you ever modify the view model within one of these listen to callbacks?
You could, yeah.
You definitely could. I wonder if you should.
It's still a side effect. No, ideally, you wouldn't, right? And that's why, like, I'm not sure that for like AJAX request is necessarily the best thing. If you're coming around, if you're kind of coming back to changing the property in the view model, it's better for, like, if I were to actually if I were to write this with the value helper, I could write it in a very different way, which would be to, well, there's a variety of different ways. One is like, if I were doing it kind of like what I think the streaming view models proposal would look like, this would essentially emit a playing event on the view model, and then my play and pause would reduce the playing or pause or maybe even toggle events. Also reduce, yeah, it would reduce all of those plus the, I think that's actually all it needs to reduce. So I would use can value to derive playing from events that are emitted by these functions. And then if you were making an AJAX request that was eventually like had to like do something to actually update playing, then you would do the AJAX request in there. That value definitely changes the way you can write things. But again, for something as simple as this, I think it's fine, more or less fine, to have these imperative changing playing yourself. But if playing got any bigger, I might actually start to make playing derive from events fired other places.
So one other thing I think would be interesting is like adding a feature to our controls that isn't available in the native controls. Because right now you basically have just replicated what's already available in those native controls, right?
Yeah.
So what other cool things could we add that the native controls don't have, like a jump forward 10 seconds button or something like that? And that kind of thing would be...
Bitballs has one of those.
And that kind of thing would be super easy to add on top. And that might drive home why we're doing all of this to replace something that already exists.
Yeah. I didn't know that was such a problem. I thought this still had intrinsic value without having to like make something that extended the
I think it does, right? I think this guide is really interesting already. I'm just saying it would.
There you go. All right. So look
awesome.
Good?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. That's it for me. Topics that people want to talk about.
I have one that's pretty quick. I was going to have tree shaking on by default. Does anyone have any objections to that? Just an optimization. Okay.
I mean,
sometimes when you're developing these things, it kind of worries you because you're like, oh, is it going to work? But yeah, obviously, I'm going to make sure it works with like PMO and stuff. So.
Yeah, that's the concern. Is like we're breaking people's builds by accident with it on.
Yeah.
We don't get the logic right. So as long as you're confident that it's going to work, then yeah, absolutely turn it on. And even if you're like, I would say if you're like 90% confident it's going to work for 90% of people, I think it's, well, to me, well, then it gets a little dicey. Well, because it's like, is it a breaking change to do this?
It's a dead code elimination, just a different type of something. Uglify is already doing this. It's already removing code.
Yeah, I mean, if the worst case is like we have it working for like 90% of users, and then they just have a flag. They're like, "Oh, I just upgraded to the new version."
Yeah, there is going to be a flag to not
working. There's a flag to like set it back. I think that's reasonable to like, have our, we kind of rely on our users to. We try to test everything as much as we can, but I still think it's like okay to put stuff like improvements out in the wild if you've done the tests and you've done whatever you can to make sure that you're going to try to avoid errors, especially if there's a flag to like set it back to the old thing. I think that's all right. It's open source.
All right, that's all.
Cool. Kevin, did you have a topic?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the graph. So let me share my screen again so people have a visual. So we have this graph, which is flashy and looks cool. But I don't know. I think most people won't find this super interesting or super useful, I mean. And we can definitely make it more useful. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. It's like, what should this actually look like and what should it do? So one thing that would be nice is like if you click on this, it actually inspects that element in the page, that kind of thing. So it's two things, like what should it look like and then what functionality should we add to it. So one thing that we've talked about already is like removing all of the internal observations and scope key data from this. I think that's probably a very good place to start. So one question with that is like, how do we actually do that? How do we... Maybe that's something I can figure out later.
I think we know the types of things that we probably do. Well, how to do it is a little tricky. Like you gotta do graph, like cycle detection and things like that. I mean, Manuel and I started talking about it. It can be tricky. You need graph library tools so that you can say, okay, I see that there's a cycle here, a cycle comprised of entirely not like, user-facing stuff. So I can remove that. I can ask like the graph to delete that, and now we've got a more simplified graph. And you keep doing transformations on your graph. The problem is really like, one problem that we're probably going to face at some point too is these graphs can probably be gigantic.
Yeah.
And what do we do in that circumstance? If like, hopefully it's not a big performance thing. I would not worry about performance in the beginning because this is a debugger tool anyways. Like if it takes like, 3 seconds to draw, all right. Like for now.
Yeah. It's pretty fast right now.
But this is a tiny app.
Yeah, no, it is. So yeah, the other thing that I was thinking about since we talked, an hour ago is like, is this sort of graph really the most useful visualization? So the library that we're using has other options. One of them is like this kind of it normally looks like this, kind of a tree structure, which we probably could use if we take out all of the internal things that cause, well, I'm not sure, to be honest, how we, so what I'm thinking about is like, if this were more directed, if we had all of the things that are changing this name property, which is the thing I originally graphed. So let's say like name was here at the top, and this was just the things that change it, and we kind of target it this way, it might be more useful. And then have a separate graph that's like all of the things that name is changing, which in this case is like this name change count and then the paragraph. So if we kind of separate the two graphs, what do you guys think about that?
Is this data structure a tree structure? Like, is it actually a tree structure?
No, it's a graph.
No.
Yeah, it's a graph. What's the difference between a tree and a graph? A graph can connect.
Trees aren't cyclic.
Right.
Yeah. So like, how would you like if you look at this kind of ring here?
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's what I was thinking. It's not tree structure, so we can't really do that.
Well, okay, so
Sure, you could.
well, you can only if you pare down the data or something like that, right? Like you gave people only a glimpse of, the full graph.
Or you changed the arrows so that they could be bidirectional. Because like in this case, it's really just, if we took out all the internal things, it would just be one line connecting this input value to the first property.
Sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not still going to have cycles, though. Like cycles will probably and can still exist. Because you could have a.
Don't we prevent cycles though? Wouldn't that be a problem if there were cycles?
Cycles are prevented currently through can-stash bindings through a semaphore that with any batch only allows parent to child or child to parent communication to kind of happen like once around, which we might change in the future because people have valid use cases that seem, but then we expose people maybe to unending cycles. Cycles will still exist, and I guess the reason why I'm saying that is like I could still write code that would create a cycle. Like that isn't just one-to-one, but it would have like 3 different things, and each one writes to the next one and comes back to the first one.
Yeah,
you're just going to have a cycle, and you can't do anything about it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that like we can't try to make trees. Right? Like, this doesn't mean like you can't like say, okay, we're going to start going in this direction. I mean, if we had, I think what's worth doing to just focus our discussion is what is an ideal representation, right? And then what is like a representation that like, what are things that we feel like we can, if that's the goal, like we think that, or maybe there's like several goals along the way to this ideal representation. Because I think that like in an ideal representation, we talked about the thing that I showed you, but even out of that, another representation might have like, oh, everything that you change goes to the right, and everything you changes you goes to the left. Now there might be something that does both, and what you do is like you will just go like do it by distance, where it's like, okay, 5, 5. It's like things that I change, things that I change. Now, once something changes you, well, if it's all based on like how far away from you it is. So if you change something 6 steps, but are changed by something 1 step, well, then it goes on what changes you side. But then there's still going to be arrows. Like you can think of it as like the tree is growing, but then there's still going to like maybe behind the frame, there's like arrows that are like connecting the 2 trees. If you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You could design it like that, and that would be better than what's here.
Yeah.
And then you click on it, and the graph reshuffles, and you just keep clicking, and you can, I think that would be, I don't know if this supports that, but that would probably be somewhere between like easy and then like the other idea we talked about.
When you say the other ideal we talked about,
do you have the thing that little?
Oh, yeah. I don't know why I had that, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So Kevin will pull it up, and this is my like moonshot quick idea. To me, there's the DOM, your view, and your view model data. And what you want to see is how all of those things communicate. So like I can say, oh, it says to-dos and there's 5 remaining. I can click on that piece of DOM and then I can say, oh, where's the view that rendered that? Oh, that's to-dos remaining complete count. I can see my view. I can click on that and then it'll show, oh, where does complete count come from in the view model? Well, there's a complete count property of the view model. I can click on that and then I can say, oh, that comes from these, maybe it'll actually list these 5 different to-dos. They're completed property because complete count derives from all of those. I can click on one of them and it can take me to like the checkbox that it's two-way, its completed property is two-way bound to, and then I can work to the actual like checkbox of the DOM. So that way, like I can see my different layers and how they are all interacting. Was one representation of this that I felt like is organized in a way that people think about these things. Because that's the problem with the other one is even if we just did it in a big tree, it's not, it's just like a tree of, it's just like everywhere. And it doesn't really distinguish between like, what is the view and what's going on in the view model.
Yeah.
One thing we could maybe just do is like for the other one is just even start coloring those nodes. If it's,
for this.
If it's a scope key data, then we know it's view related. So make those nodes green. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or if it's like an attribute observable, that's green as well. It's closer to the DOM. HTML paragraph element, obviously that's DOM. I mean, in some ways you can even do DOM ones versus view ones versus data ones.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that I was curious about. So the arrows in this graph, I think, are different depending on whether it's a derive or a mutate. Is that useful?
It is to me, but I don't know if it's useful to everybody else.
What is it now?
So like the dashed lines are mutate dependencies, whereas the solid lines are derived dependencies. Anyway, maybe we just need a legend because that's very not obvious looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, a lot of those aren't, I think it's useful to know and to be able to see, but because we're seeing so many, I think I really do think the first step is just removing the scope key data kind of things or like consolidating them, right? On my app viewModel.name, you really need like those 2 different, the observation for scope key data name read and the scope key data name. No.
Yeah, so that's actually the reason that I ask this is that like if we want to remove them, we need to figure out how are we going to display those lines. So take this example, this HTML input element. The only thing between here and here that would exist are these 2, whereas this is a derived dependency, but this is a mutate. If I need to combine those edges somehow, I need to figure out which way to display it. Does that make sense?
But so wait, that's two-way bound, right?
To this, yeah. Just because attribute observables are two-way bound.
Yeah, but then the attribute observable can mutate my app view model first. Actually, there's kind of an interesting thing. There's something missing in this. Oh, I see where the path is. What do you mean no? I thought dashed is mutates.
You're saying it can mutate. Oh, it can mutate this, you're saying, the observable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
yes,
the attribute input value is there's something, there's no derive. Oh, because attributes, they have their own state. So they're never derived. They're always mutated. Okay, so that's why there's like, well, to me, I think you would simplify it and there'd be kind of 2 different mutation lines. One, you would have what I think you would have is a scope key data first. Yeah, I mean, I think we just draw it out, but I think you would have something like, the hard part for this is that there's not a scope key data first coming the other way. That observable from scope, what is that if not a scope key data? That's what's weird to me. What is observable?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. I guess what I would say, what I would think would happen is we would consolidate the observable from scope. Don't worry about it right now, Kevin.
Oh, it is. Okay.
But go back to the. I would imagine what we would say is like observable from scope is basically the same thing as that scope key data. We're going to combine those. What you really want to see is an HTML input element value to two-way bound to the scope key data, which is two-way bound to app VM.first. Because the scope key data is the part of the view, or you want some kind of like, or better yet, you have some kind of like view binding. I don't know. So the can/stash binding would kind of like cobble all of those things together to a can/stash binding. I don't know how though.
I think all you want to see is this two-way bound with this, because that's how it is.
Through the binding, I think, is what I would want to. It'd be nice to see the binding represented here.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the same reason why, like, I want to see that, like, HTML paragraph element in the top right. I want to see the view. I want to see the scope key data. I don't want to say. I mean, I don't want to call it scope key data, but I want to say like this part of the view.
I see what you're saying.
And then that is tied to app view model. So it's like this part of the data connected to this part of the view is producing this part of the DOM.
Okay.
Maybe we can label these things in kind of, that's what I'm saying. Like maybe these things all need like a label, which is like, this is view related, this is DOM related, this is data model related. And then you just kind of like, and you know, all of those attribute observable from scope, I'm talking on the bottom left, those are all related to a stash binding. And they maybe can be labeled with that. And then you're just like, well, this is all because of this one can/stash binding. So I'm just going to like get all the things that are labeled can/stash binding and just put them into a single node, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. That would just say :bind or whatever, input.value :bind first. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. A lot of stuff to think about. Anything else you guys want to talk about with this? Awesome. Thanks for entertaining my unsure questions.
Yeah, I mean, just to give us some rah like motivation for that. I mean, I do think that if this is a problem, that if we can visualize how state flows through an application, I think that can be a game changer for CanJS. It's a really hard problem, but I think could have a really big impact for people. Just imagine coming into a project, a brand new CanJS project you've never seen before, and you click on a DOM node, and it's like, oh, well, that is derived from this property in this file, the view model, and like that is derived from this, and that's connected to this and connected to this. It's like, boom, I understand the application.
Yeah.
You know, without having to do much. I mean, that's just how do you figure it out now, right? If you were just dropped down a CanJS application and you looked at a DOM node, like I look up, okay, I'm going to find the component. Okay. Now, once we get the component, you look for the view, that part of the view that looks like it's rendering that DOM. Oh, what is in the magic tags? Oh, it's this property. Now I'm going to look back in the view model, and you have to know all of that. And this would just give you that picture immediately. I think that'd be very awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, we need a designer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would help a lot to like have a designer be like, here's what it would look like. Cool. Anything else?
No.
All right. Any other topics people want to discuss before we wrap it up? Cool. So I guess just some roadmap stuff. I think we should start maybe discussing this at the end of every one of these. I am, I guess, in like status too, I guess, if there's any other things that people want to say. I think we are about, maybe I should have the new can query stuff ready definitely by the end of next 2 weeks. We'll have another survey out then as well. We're trying to release a CanJS 4.0 that's going to have the query stuff combined with the tree shaking stuff that Matthew's working on. Matthew, I don't know where you are with how you feel, how that stuff's coming along.
Well, you're talking about CanJS.
CanJS, yeah.
It's out in 4.
Huh?
It's out in 4.2. I do need to make sure. I haven't checked that it works with. So I probably need to do some polish on the CanJS side. But on the still side, I feel pretty good about it. I think I should be able to have it by the next sprint on the still side as well.
Yeah, I was talking about for 4.0 or for 5.0.
Oh, for 5.0. Oh, you're talking about for the main. Yeah, I mean, I haven't worked on. That's a lot of documentation updating.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's going to be like another 6 weeks post. We might have CanJS 5.0, and CanJS 5.0 will have the data stuff that I just worked on, which should be released like actually soon if people want to use that instead of. Maybe we even put up like I probably should publish a pre-release of 5.0 with those docs so people can start looking at that and use that if they really want to, because it's quite a bit better. And then Matthew's going to work on getting the tree shaking stuff into CanJS 5.0 and kind of help rewriting our docs and making sure that all works in example apps. That's going to be how people are going to start using CanJS, at least when they first come to the site. And then Kevin is working on debugging stuff. When do you think like someone can actually install it?
Yeah, so that's my goal for the next 2 weeks is get a version of the DevTools into the Chrome web store. We'll see. It probably won't have a whole lot more than is there now, but I think that's a good start, and at least gives people something they can install, and then we can start to iterate from there. So that's my goal for the next 2 weeks.
Does it automatically update itself when we make new releases, or do people have to like opt in?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm pretty sure Chrome extensions automatically get installed. I'll have to look into it.
And then the final bit is Chasen is working on making component routing a little bit easier and components easier to test. He got, and then this new something that's kind of like can compute of all old called can value, which kind of encapsulates all the single value observables. The goal there is really to make it easier to test components and to improve routing. I would say he's got at least another 4 weeks for that. That'll probably also be released in CanJS 5.0, but it should be all available in 4.0. But my guess is the guide will come out with CanJS 5.0. So those are the big things that we're working on right now. Also, as a team, we're going to start helping some of our Pitovi clients upgrade to CanJS 4.0. So that's I guess our status. Look for the survey next week. Please vote on what you think is important. Until next time, get her done. You can do it and steal someone's code.